I am Ruth-Ann Thorn, and I've been an art dealer for more than 2 decades, working with artists from all over the world. I've always wondered, do artists create from within, or are they influenced by their surroundings? And why do they choose where they live? What do they get from their environment? If they were to live somewhere else, would their art be different? These are the questions we will answer as we explore cities across the country in Art of the City. New Orleans is a unique city filled with culture and art. It's the birthplace of jazz, known as NOLA, the Big Easy. And today you're going to go in and meet artists that have impacted the world right here from New Orleans through their artwork. So join us for Art of the City, New Orleans. I'm on my way to meet this artist, Willie Birch. He is one of the most influential artists here in New Orleans, and he's had museum shows all over the world, and now we get to go to his studio and meet him.
How you do?
Birch.
Mr. Thorn.
Nice to meet you here.
How you do? I was born 2133 Chapatula Street, in the back of my aunt's restaurant, Thanksgiving night, 1942. I decided to come out Thanksgiving night at 8 o'clock at night, and there was nothing they could do to stop the party. New Orleans is a very communal city, and this is where people nurtured you. So I was the neighborhood artist. These women encouraged me through everything. So I grew up around all these women.
Okay.
And so basically it was my world, and they treated me like that. So I became this.
Were you the little prince?
I was the prince, and it took a lot of years to explain that. Till certain girlfriends explained to me that, you just sit here and wait for us. And I say, babe, look, what to tell you, But I eventually understood that. The first time I went to New Orleans Museum of Art was I was 11 years old. I was one of the young black kids coming out of elementary school to be invited to go to the New Orleans Museum, and that just blew me away. So all these things are setting up in my head why I become...
So when you say segregated, are you saying that you could only go into a certain portion?
No,
or you
we couldn't go
in it at all?
No, the New Orleans had a way of the ground that they built New Orleans Museum, which was Delgado Museum, on this private piece of property. So in order to get to the museum, you had to walk on the private property. So of course, if you walked on the private property, you'd be arrested. So that meant, well, it's life. It's what segregation and what inequality will bring to us. So that meant that black people couldn't go to the museum. And this woman named Elizabeth Catlett, that most people know about, she was teaching at Dillard, and she came up with a scheme. And the scheme was that she would have the driver take she and her students from Dillard University, her art student, and they would ride up to the steps of the museum, never put foot on the ground, and go into the museum. That basically was the beginning of the integration of NOMA. I wanted to become an artist at 11 years old. The Dewdrop Inn was the place where you had B.B. King, James Brown, Sam Cooke, Big Mama Thornton.
All the greats.
All the greats. It just was incredible what was coming out of here, which we basically became rock and roll. When I was about 13 or 14 years old, Alan Toussaint, who's one of the most incredible songwriters, he drove up to the Dewdrop. He's 17 years old. He drives up in a pink convertible Cadillac. This is the 50s. But I was just mesmerized by the fact that this 17-year-old kid an African American, could purchase a pink Cadillac.
Wow.
So I said, if he can do that, then I can become an artist. My mother was a cook. My mother was the first person I know to vote. What happens then is that I joined the civil rights movement at 18, and I meet Aretha Castle Haley. There's Aretha Castle Haley Boulevard. This woman was probably one of the most powerful people I met. Miss Dookie Chase, Miss Chase, all these are icons here. And then we'd go on demonstrations. So we just were rebel rousers.
What did that feel like too when you started to see that your push
it's empowering.
Is opening up these doors?
It's empowering, but the drawback was that my mother was receiving a lot of pressure, and the people that my mother worked for were putting pressure on her because she couldn't control me. They put me in an art class. A woman named Maxine Holtry Daniels. The first African-American art teacher in the history of the public school system of New Orleans. And 9 of us took art classes there. Twice a week took formal classes. And by the time I got to high school, I understood how to do portraits, do landscapes, one point, all this stuff. So none of this stuff I'm using today.
So you got all that training from her.
Right. Papier-mâché is something that we do here. Mardi Gras Indian floats. It's all out of paper. Paper was something that people saw as having no worth. Mm-hmm. So part of my challenge was to force the art world to see these things as precious, to see it wasn't the paper, it was the actual, what I did with it that brought it to another level of understanding. So what happened is the Metropolitan Museum came, mm-hmm. and they bought, I believe it was 6 pieces. They were all papier-mâché, whether it was relief sculptures or relief paintings, but it's always narrative.
That's
and amazing. Then I got a full page in the New York Times, and things went crazy.
You have done some pretty amazing, I mean, you know, as far as the notoriety and the accolades that you've received. It's really an impressive resume, I'd say.
No, I'm in that major book of 20th century art with Picasso, Matisse. You name him, there is Willie Birch sitting in there, you know, and you go, whoa!
Do you have to pinch yourself?
No, I don't, because I still sometimes wonder, you don't realize, what are you bringing to the table?
You can have all of the academic and you can have the talent, but the truth of the matter is, do you have the soul? Do you have the soul?
I agree.
And the soul comes from the gumbo. It comes from the mixing pot of your life story, like you're telling us, of everything that you've experienced and all those layers. And then you bring it together, and then this thumbprint right here is the only one ever in history.
This is my white picket fence.
Oh, wow, look at that.
Okay. Why I wanted you to see this piece was for another reason, is because there is something called fractals. In Louisiana, the city is basically built by enslaved people. Of course, you don't get credit for it, but that's the nature of the beast. So what happens is that the way we build our structures We are constantly adding on. And of course, DNA means you take what you need from that, but you do not lose the essence of what it is. So here it is, that basic A-frame house. All of a sudden it becomes something else. The way it's built on the land, it goes with the land. It doesn't, indigenous folks, we build it according to nature. We don't do what European structures do, which is cut things into geometric shapes. It's beyond all of those things. So those are, to somebody else, may be subtle, but to me, it's so damn important because that's New Orleans. And of course, these structures speak to your identity. They speak to who you are as a human being. There's a saying that I have, which comes from a former friend of mine, I'll put it like that, David Hammond's, saying that don't be afraid to make a fool out of yourself. That's the nature of making art, because you don't know how it's going to be perceived, but why give a damn as long as you believe in it?
Mr. Willie Birch is one of the most incredible artists I've ever met personally in my life. From the black and white works that he's done to taking things out of the ground in his backyard and turning them into sculpture, everything Willie touches turns into an art form, and nobody can really contain him. And his whole life story is about taking everything that he has and turning it back into art. And I think that the Tree of Life symbolizes who Willie is as an artist. Forever giving, forever creating, a true master in every sense of the word.